It's time for a Wicked Pissa podcast.
Wicked Pissa podcast?
Wicked Pissa podcast?
It's time for a Wicked Pissa podcast.
Welcome to the Wicked Pissa podcast, a production of the Financial Planning Association of Massachusetts, intended for financial planning advisors. Welcome to this week's podcast. I'm Chris Boyd, host of the podcast and founder of Asset Management Resources, and a past president of the Massachusetts chapter of the Financial Planning Association. And for those members, just as an FYI, I'm currently the chapter's representative on the One FPA Advisory Council and a member of its executive committee. Thanks for listening today. When we started the podcast, we had in mind leveraging many of the chapter's speakers and events to encourage those who didn't get to attend these events to come in the future, and to extend the great resources that the chapter is providing to those who didn't get to attend, and maybe encourage all financial advisors to consider being a member of the chapter. Now, however, with fewer events this year, I'm left to my own devices to contemplate topics and guests around what I think is of interest and what reflects the value of the chapter membership and that of the association as a whole. With this in mind, shortly you'll hear my interview with one of our chapter's success stories, of which there are many, but this week I'm joined by Mark Friedman. With a practice focused on the mass affluent and $450 million in assets under management, working with clients in a 10-mile radius, Friedman Financial has been doing something right for quite a while as a second-generation firm. Hear Mark's story and glean insights for your own business. Additionally, last week I had hoped to arrange for a guest who would shed light on the CARES Act, but unfortunately that fell through. So instead, this week I'm sharing content prepared by our team at our firm, Asset Management Resources. By now, I expect most advisors are rather familiar with the benefits, but if not, our last segment will provide some insights and overview. Finally, to start things off, I want to wish a happy Easter and Passover for those who celebrate these important religious holidays. With so much death and fear in our midst, as we watch the coronavirus impact our society, it's encouraging to celebrate these occasions that can remind us that God is with us and that new life will follow for us personally and as a society. With that, let's get started. All right, welcome back to the Wicked Pissa podcast. Thanks for being with us. My guest this time around is Mark Friedman of Friedman Financial, one of our members and someone who's high profile. Mark, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me, Chris.
I figured, as I was just saying before we got started, between the two of us, I didn't think we'd have much of a shortage of things to talk about, as we both are accustomed to talking both for the radio and I don't know, I think we both share the gift of gab, wouldn't you say?
Chris, you asked me one question, and I could probably talk for hours.
Very good. All right, so, well, let me do that. Let's start with that. So, Mark, tell us just initially, how did you get started in the business? Because I think you have a pretty interesting story as it relates to that.
Yeah, I actually, I'm in this business because my wife made me do it. The truth of the matter is, I was selling back in 1991. I was selling Chinese food takeout containers called Atlas Paper in Massachusetts, and lighting as a karaoke host in a bar in Faneuil Hall called Seaside, and which is now, I think, it is a closed store there. Tuesday night, while I was karaokeing, this woman comes in, asks me to sing a song. She wanted to do the duet "Summer Nights from Greece." And we sang, started talking afterwards, and she said, hey, what's your last name? I said, my last name's Friedman. She says, mine's Weinstein. You want to get married? And so 4 months later, we were engaged. 14 months later, we were married. But before we actually got married, Laura and I were out for lunch one day, and she said to me, have you thought about your future? Is it going to be selling Chinese food takeout containers and doing karaoke shows? I said, well, I really haven't given that much thought. And she said, well, what does your father do for a living? And I told him, I don't know. It has something to do with money. And I was a graduate of Babson College at the time. I was a marketing major, certainly not a finance guy. And I went and had lunch with my dad, and I told him, I was exploring all sorts of possibilities, and Dad had never pressured me into coming into the business at all.
So my dad had told me that in order for me to come to work for him, I'd have to pass my Series 7 exam. And so he got me the study material, and once I passed that exam, I could go to my boss at Atlas Paper Company and quit my job and start working for him. And the first day that I went to work for my father, he handed me another set of material to start studying for the CFP exam. And so I got right on that and passed the CFP exam. And then he mentored me. And the rest is history, I guess.
That's terrific. And so your dad had his own practice at the time. And was he a sole practitioner at the time, or did he have a team of any, people as well?
Yeah, I remember back then, that was 1991 when I joined my father. My father was, I guess he's actually got a pretty good resume himself. He was, if you look back in the books, he's amongst the pioneers of the financial planning profession.
Isn't that awesome?
Dad started doing financial planning back in 1968. And he was 20 years with IDS, American Express, Ameriprise, all the different names that they had. Mm-hmm. And then in 1987 or so, he left there to join this little broker-dealer called Linsco Private Ledger back at the time to see what the world independent financing was all about. So he was really one of the big pioneers to leave, the mothership, if you will, and try to do it on his own. And so instead of trying to do financial planning with a family of funds as in his repertoire, right, Dad made a leap to do financial planning, but now offer two family of funds. He offered up at the time the Putnam Funds and the Colonial Funds, now known as Columbia Threadneedle. Right. And then he added more and more funds and services and all sorts of resources to his repertoire as he built out that financial planning program.
Well, it was very different at that time too, right? The what we're so accustomed to in terms of open architecture and the availability of brokerage accounts and so forth. It was a different story back then too, right?
Oh, it sure was. I mean, remember back then, the term check and app is what everybody referred to business as.
Right.
You didn't do anything electronically on your computer. You had to collect a check from the client. You had to get the company's application. Then you filled out your broker-dealer's new account form. And then you had to send everything via mail, track it to make sure it got deposited, record it in some kind of spreadsheet or logging system that you had.
Right.
Because I think the only type of database management system back then was this DOS-based program called DBCAMS at the time, and that was about it. Yep. Right? I mean, there wasn't much.
Yeah. No, that's really interesting too, though, just the notion that your dad was such an early adopter of financial planning and the merits of the CFP and all that process. That must have had a pretty fundamental impact on the way your firm has developed and your own development in the industry.
Well, it did, because we now have more than 5 decades. We've been at this between my dad and myself. Dad's now retired. He retired in 2007. But 5 decades of experience of building relationships that start with a financial plan. Never in our history since I've joined my father would we take on a client by accepting a check for a deposit into an investment account or a rollover before doing any type of financial planning work. Our rule has always been, at least as long as I've been with my father, we'll do a financial plan first and always before we ever implement any strategy for you.
That's great.
And that strategy has continued to expand. We've made our greater commitment at our office, where not only will we do a financial plan for you, but the financial plan must be based on what you show me, not what you tell me. So if you say I've got $100,000 in the bank and I've got, $250,000 in my 401k and my mortgage is $300,000, I'll say that's nice, but I need all the documentation.
Right.
And so for us to do a financial plan, I need the tax return, the new account, the documents that you might have, your retirement statement, your benefits. We need it all. That's how we build a relationship with our clients, starting with that. And I mean, to me, as a certified financial planner and one that needs to be a fiduciary, and if we use this term, I'm going to place the interest of my client first, how can we, in our right mind, do anything but gather all of this information about our clients, understand where everything is and what everything is worth before we ever make any type of recommendation to them.
It's a great point. Mark, tell us about your business structure and the model that you've adopted and how you, like, for example, with that financial planning engagement initially, is that part of an all-inclusive compensation when it comes to assets under management, or does it start with its own financial planning arrangement? Have you adopted other types of models that are more current with subscriptions and so forth? How do you approach all this?
Yeah, we've looked at a variety of different models, tested some things, but we have found that the tried and true way that becomes the core of what we do at our business starts with our clients engaging us first in a financial planning relationship. And that means, I should first say, if people want to understand our firm, first of all, we're pretty well based up on the North Shore, so people know where we are. But if they go to our website, and if any of our listeners here go to our website, you can find new client information and all of our information that we would send to a client, how we do our plans, all that kind of stuff. It's all there, and any of you are welcome to take a look at it. But these clients that come in, they're sent a letter beforehand that says, here's how you prepare for your initial consultation. They bring in a lot of data to our office. But there's I will not allow a client, even if they pull out their pen and the checkbook, to sign something for me in the first meeting, will not allow it to happen.
Right.
I asked them to hold on to their stuff. I said, because I want to prove to you that we've heard you, because we're going to respond with a letter to you that's customized to the conversation that we just had, that recaps what we talked about and what we told you that we would do for you. And part of what that includes is, here's what's going to be involved in the financial plan, here's what it's going to cost, and here's what other additional information we need to gather from you first.
And
so that's where it all starts.
That's great. So you start off with an introductory meeting where you're really getting to know the client and gathering all the data in that meeting. And
yeah, both the data and their feelings, goals, and their story, their personal financial story. Yeah.
So that first meeting is complimentary, where there's an interest, an indication of interest. We might be a good fit. Let's have a conversation. You use that. How long does that meeting typically last?
We budget in our office an hour and a half for that meeting. Generally, they're over in about an hour. But remember, after our meeting, I don't want to be back to back to back with meetings, because after that meeting is over, I want to send the client on their way, and I want to I dictate their thank you letter that recaptures everything that we talked about. And it also allows me to dictate a memo to file that goes into our contact management system. We use Redtail, where it stores the information and the story that we just shared with the clients, so that we can be reminded about what happened.
When you dictate that, do you use a program, or is that something that someone in your office then turns around and puts together?
No, we're still using CopyTalk. We've been using it for, I don't know, probably a good 15 years or so.
Yeah.
It's a solution. I don't know if it's the solution, but it's worked for us, and it's what we've grown comfortable with.
And with that, you can both dictate a letter as well as the notes?
Of course. I can dictate tasks to my client, to my staff as well, if I want, through CopyTalk.
And then what happens? It's received in an email or some manner that it's available to you to then post into Redtail or something like that?
That's right. My assistant, Jody, gets an email. Oftentimes the dictators aren't the best spellers. Yeah. And so we have to clean that up a little bit. True, yeah. And then Jody cleans up the message, reassigns the tasks out to whom it needs to go to. She'll format any letters. She'll post the memos to file and do whatever is necessary.
So when before going on, I want to come back to the whole letter and engagement and all that, but maybe before doing that, it would be helpful to get an understanding of what does the composition of your team look like, so that, I was thinking, who is in that meeting? Is it just you, or is it other people? And, but it's maybe relevant to know what's your team look like?
Yeah, so it always fascinates people when I tell them the story of our team, because we are a rather large office with a large number of clients, but a very few number of employees. So let me give you a little scope and a picture of what our office looks like. We are now at, as of now, about $450 million in assets under management.
Nice. Wow.
About 94 to 95% of that is advisory assets. We also have roughly 450 households, of which 90% of them live within 10 miles of our office in Peabody.
That's great. Wow.
So,
but that's a lot of people. That's a lot of people.
It is. But, there are, and so you can do the math and realize that the average household has about $1 million with us. But I'll tell you that there's a large number of people that have assets that are probably between 250 and 500,000 as households, and a few that are, in the $2 or $3 million range. We only have one client with roughly $10 million, maybe 2 or 3 with 5 million plus.
Yeah.
There's probably another 40 with 2 to 4 million,
right,
and maybe another 60 or so with $1 million to 2 million. But so it's pretty well spread out and balanced.
Yeah.
We have, but our clients come to us, and one of the things that we love to do is we instruct our clients to say that the way we run our practice is 8:30 to 5. We do not do evening appointments. We do not do weekend appointments. And the reason for that is we want to be emblematic to our clients and those that are prospects to us, to say that we want our staff to have time with our family just as much as you want to have time with your family. And just as much as you will find time for your doctor or your dentist or your local nail parlor to get treatments done and care done during the day, we want you to put the work that you put around your financial planning, your investments, and your overall financial life at a place that's equally as important. And when you come to our office, we get to control the distractions. It's one of the reasons why we don't do house calls anymore. My father did that for 20 years. But we said when people come to our office, we can control the distractions. We have the technology at our fingertips. We control the noises and everything else that goes on. And it's a much, much better and meaningful meeting.
That's very interesting. And so how many meetings do you typically have in the course of a day? And I want to have you come back to the composition of your team.
Oh, yeah. So quickly, we generally have 2 to 3 meetings in our office a day when we're there, of course. Because right now we're quarantined at home, and so that's a whole different experience. But the composition of the team is 5 people. That's it. 5 of us for $450 million and 450 households.
And what does that look like in terms of tasks? Who does what?
Yeah. So we work very, very efficiently. So Jody is, we've heard the expression, the director of first impressions. Mm-hmm. Jody is the one that manages all the calendars. She also supports me with all of the compliance responsibilities, manages all of the marketing stuff that goes on in our office, all of the communications, and is also the office manager as well. Sonia is our operations manager, and Sonia's been with me, I think, 12 years now. I would put her up against anybody as the best operations manager there is out there. She is extraordinarily efficient. We pride ourselves in having what's called a NIGO rate, not in good order rate, of 0% through our broker-dealer LPL. I guess the typical NIGO rate for an office is around 9 to 12%. Ours has been 0 and consistently at that level for 6 years running.
Nice.
So I credit that all to Sonia. So she handles all the payouts, all the required minimum distributions, new accounts that get set up, any of the transfers, changes in distribution payouts, dividend adjustments, all that kind of stuff. And frankly, one of the things that we do deal with, because my father started this firm in 1968, is death is something that has become a very big part of our business. Right. It's not that we serve bad coffee, but people have been around for a while.
Right.
And so we average 18 a year, so 1.5 a month. And Sonia has created a fabulously efficient system to communicating with surviving spouses and the survivors so that we can manage that redistribution of money successfully. The other person that's there is Christian. Christian has been with me a little bit more than 3 years. We found him.
Before you go on to Christian,
yeah, sure.
Does your operations manager handle your bookkeeping as well?
No, we outsource and do. We outsource our bookkeeping to a freelance person who charges us a few hours a week.
I see.
She's frankly never even in the office.
Yeah.
We use QuickBooks Online, and she handles all that for us.
Very good.
Christian has been with me about 3 years, and we brought him over. He graduated from the University of Wisconsin and was working for a financial planning firm in the Milwaukee area. I just said period because I thought I was dictating to Copy Talk.
Yeah, right.
I caught myself saying that. Sorry.
That's okay. That's funny. Old habits, right? Yeah.
His girlfriend and fiance took a job at TJX Corp as a buyer.
Oh, yeah.
And they moved out this way, and so he was looking to work with the financial planning firm out this way. And so we hired Christian. He's been a great addition. He had done all of his CFP examination stuff before graduating college. So what he needed to do was get his 3 years experience to get his CFP after his name.
Right.
But he had done all of the testing while he was in college.
Nice.
And he got a Series 7 as well. So he was ready to go. And he supports my business partner, Marion, and I, doing basically all of the client reviews. He prepares all of them, does some analysis work with investments, does some tax loss management, does some trading, and whatever else Marion and I might need. But mostly, and he also does all of the financial planning work in the office. So any new financial plans that are done, Christian writes them, prepares them, and creates them for us.
Would you mind sharing what programs you use for that?
Yeah, sure. We use eMoney as our primary source of financial planning information, yet we pull from a lot of different places, but eMoney becomes the primary source.
Great.
Marion, go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, that's great. Continue, please.
Yeah, so Marion is my business partner. Marion's been with me since 2000. Is that right? 2000, so 20 years. Yeah, a long time.
Wow.
That she and I have been working together. She was working for Prudential, I think it was, Prudential Investments at the time, 20 some odd years ago. She came over to join us to kind of play the role that Christian played. And she quickly emerged into someone that we knew was going to be a tremendous asset for our firm. And Marion is a critical component in our office. She is an owner in the firm, and she meets with clients. She is, I would guess, at least 50 to 60% of our clients, even more than that, would far rather talk to her than talk to me right now.
Yeah.
She's built an extraordinary rapport with our clients. She's also responsible for managing the investment portfolios for our clients. And that's what Marion does.
So you're the lead advisor.
Marion and I are both lead advisors, I would say. We share in the clients that come into the office.
Marion has the responsibilities for the portfolio design and implementation. Do you outsource any of that, or is that all handled internally?
No,
how do you go about that?
Yeah, we keep it all internal.
Yeah.
We made the decision several years ago, well, even more than several years ago, decades ago, I should say, that we were not going to get into the individual stock game or the individual security game. We do primarily mutual funds and exchange traded funds. We do use some individual bonds if necessary, but most of it's bond funds. And we build our own portfolios for our clients. We rely on research that we gather through our broker dealer and through other outside sources, but we have not chosen to outsource money management to another party. It may not be, I'm not saying that we're going to pull it off the table, but because we have so many clients that have been with us for so many years, there's a lot of embedded gains and a lot of stuff that our clients own.
Yeah.
There's a bunch of legacy positions. And on top of that, 65% of our clients are retired, meaning that they're on payouts.
Yeah.
And trying to manage payouts in modeled portfolios is a very difficult thing to do.
So you're not necessarily adhering to a pure model approach. Would you say that your primary objective is to do things in an asset allocation, more likely a strategic asset allocation? It
is very much a strategic asset allocation structure. And just kind of going back a little bit, I know that you asked me, we were talking about the financial plan earlier.
Yeah.
So yes, we charge a fee for the financial plan.
Yes.
And that fee that the clients pay us it includes a financial plan with specific instructions on how they can implement a variety of different strategies that we think are important. And that might include, getting homeowners insurance or buying an umbrella policy or making some changes to their long-term care coverage or life insurance coverage, making adjustments to their tax withholdings or their benefits booklets. It might also include rebalancing to their 401k or 403b, or maybe there's some investment strategies that they own personally that they might consider reallocating to. So all of the stuff, because as a CFP, we feel that if you're paying us a fee to get objective financial planning advice, my recommendation can't be, work with me. We need to give you recommendations that allow you to implement on your own because you just paid us a fee to give you that advice. Now, 90% of the people will say, well, what of these recommendations can you do for us?
Right.
And that's when we say, well, the money that you have sitting in 9 different retirement accounts, we can help you consolidate that. And we can manage that money for you. And if that money does come over, we would charge an asset management fee, just like everybody else does. We would charge an asset management fee, and all future financial planning fees would be waived. So let me be sure I'm clear here.
Yeah,
so that the clients pay us, our fee right now is $3,000. That's our minimum fee to do financial planning.
Okay.
And I would say 95% of the people that work with us pay that fee. They pay us $1,500 up front. When the plan is presented to them, they will have the option, I tell them, that if there is strategies in here that we could help them implement, we will waive the second half of our fee.
Mm-hmm.
And they'll have 30 days to make that decision. If not, they'll get a bill in the mail for the balance due of their financial plan. However, there are times when we will do some financial planning work for clients where we'll say, there's really not much that we believe we could do a good job to help you with. Maybe you don't have assets that meet our size requirements. And so we'll just charge them the financial planning fee and they'll go ahead and implement on their own. We'll introduce them to a representative, perhaps over at Fidelity, over at Schwab, or somewhere else where they can implement some of those strategies.
What is that threshold that you typically would look to for your clientele?
Right now we're about $350,000.
Yeah. And below that, it's just either not enough value or not enough compensation to add, make it productive for you guys.
Yeah, we've just decided, look, at 450 households, we've got to be particular with who comes into our office.
Right.
And fortunately or unfortunately, we have a radio show, which is great. I love doing my radio show. I've been doing it for 8 years. And the radio show breeds a lot of tire kickers, a lot of people who want to learn more about the business. Now, some are great prospects and have become great clients. Others are people that could be good clients for certain financial advisors. They just don't meet our minimums. And others are just, looking for debt consolidators to help them with their problems.
Right.
One of the challenges that we have, honestly, up where we are, is that we turn away more business than we can accept. Nice problem to have.
Sure is. Wow. And
we would love to find other financial advisors who sit there and float all by themselves and say, you know what? I'd love to be part of something. We have some great opportunities for those that might want to explore that. So if anybody's listening and you're interested, we'd love to talk with you.
Very good. How long does your typical process take? So you send out that letter of engagement. They say, I'm willing to spend at least $3,000 or whatever it ends up being, depending on the complexity. And then you have them back for the planning meeting where you ultimately deliver advice and recommendations. Do you break that into different meetings? Do you try to do it all in one sitting? How does that typically work out for you guys?
Yeah, because most of our clients are what I would call the mass affluent baby boomer. They fall into that category. They're not people with extraordinary wealth, but they generally have good positive cash flow, and they realize that they're not sure whether they have enough assets and resources to support themselves as they approach retirement or in retirement. And their biggest question is, will I run out of money? They don't necessarily have the luxury to say that they can spend everything that they want and not worry about anything. They probably have enough money to cover their day-to-day expenses. And sometimes we can help them spend a little bit more. But if they go over the top, they're going to run out. So they need us for a lot of different purposes. So when I explain the process to them, I say, look, if you'd like to move forward with us, here's what's going to happen. We're going to, if you'd like, I'd like to hold on to the information that you've brought along with you today, or through the letter that we've sent that we're going to follow up with you. We're going to ask you to gather more stuff, even more than what you brought along today. And then you can drop that off to our office. You sign our contract, you drop off the retainer check, and we'll get started. But what get started means is that we'll take all of this information, go through it, and build your net worth statement. We'll enter it into eMoney to build a net worth statement that shows ownership, beneficiary designations, and structures it properly so that we can see what you own less what you owe on one piece of paper. In addition, we'll also try to build a basic cash flow statement that looks at dollars that are coming in versus dollars that are going out, just so we can get a feel for that. That's going to take us about 2 weeks. We're going to send those two documents in the mail to you or email it to you, sometimes along with a few additional questions. We'll ask you to sign off on that, because when you sign off on that document, that means that we have properly captured what we both collectively agree are your assets and liabilities. And we can now work from a position that doesn't say garbage in versus garbage out. We're actually working with real data based upon the information that you gave us. Then when we get that back from you, we'll then say it's going to take us probably 3 to 4 weeks for us to analyze all of the data, go through all of the stuff that you provided to us, and we will provide a personalized financial plan, which will include a SWOT analysis, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, an analysis of every piece of asset and liability that you've provided to us, our own recommendations on points of vulnerability that exist within your account, within your portfolio and your financial life, as well as some things that we think you're doing really well that you don't need to worry about. We'll then take a snapshot that says, if you can continue to operate the way you're operating right now, here's what your likelihood into retirement looks like. But then we'll also offer up to you a couple what-if scenarios, because we're going to be presenting all of this stuff to you interactively in our office. And so we'll have some baseline what-ifs set up, but we're going to allow you to participate in that conversation, and I'll generally bring Christian into the meeting with me so that he can be modeling what-ifs as we're talking, and it shows right up on the screen.
That's great. You mentioned the radio show as part of your marketing. I wouldn't mind diverting for a few minutes to talk about your thoughts about, one, what's your experience been with radio, number one? Number two, are there other central parts of your marketing with 450 clients? I imagine referrals are a big part of your way you find new clients at this time, but maybe you could just talk a little bit about that process. And
sure. Well, just to let you know, in the business that we're in today, because like I said, we have more prospects coming into our office than we're willing to take into the office.
Right.
So we're very particular with who's coming in. We'd love to find a home for some of these people, but we just don't know where to send them right now. Our focus in our office, especially during these challenging times during this virus, this is not about business acquisition right now. This is about business retention. And our business has always been focused on business retention, because I've always said that if we can keep our existing clients happy, we will never go hungry. Finding new business will come just because you're doing a good job for your existing clients, especially when they all live within a local radius of where your office is.
You're going to run into them at the grocery store or whatever. Well, maybe not these days, but you're going to see them somewhere. Yeah.
Yeah. But I'll tell you, one of the challenges is you're out. My kids are a little bit older now. When I was out with my kids when they were younger, and you'd want to just belt them at the Dunkin' Donuts or at a supermarket or whatever, just because they're being absolutely ruthless.
But you couldn't do that.
That's right, because I've been in the community a long time. I grew up here.
That's funny.
And you got to be very careful. But you know what? It really is a test of your own character, and it's a great example for your kids as well, that, sometimes you have to be, you have to just always know that you've got to be on when you're in your community.
Right.
And that's really important. But as it relates to the radio show is a great source of referral when you do it for a while. There's a lot of people and you probably know this, Chris. I mean,
it takes a good 5 years, I think, to really get traction. And that's what I've been told by other people who had a radio show before I was 5 years into it.
Yeah. I mean, we actually did our first year, we did at WTKK, which was a statewide talk radio station out of Boston.
Yeah.
In fact,
that was a
Susan
good one.
Kaplan,
that was great.
Yeah. I mean, as many of your listeners here know Susan Kaplan, Bob Glovsky. She used to do the Money Show in the mornings there.
Right.
Did it for a long, long time. And I did the 4:00 segment with my business partner, Marion. We got to do it for an hour. And and we would get calls every Sunday. And we would it wasn't until about 4 months in before I got my first prospect that called my office to say, hey, we'd like to come in and talk to you.
Right.
And unfortunately, because we were a big statewide radio station, I was getting calls from all around the state of Massachusetts, including Connecticut and Rhode Island.
Yeah.
And that wasn't fitting our client profile. We wanted them to be within 10 miles of our office. So fortunately, after a year, and it was very expensive to be on that radio show, they decided to change their model from talk radio to hip hop.
Right.
And so that wasn't a great channel for money talk radio.
No.
He ended up going to a local radio station that is just a mile and a half or two from my office, and it focuses exclusively on the North Shore, the Merrimack Valley, and the southern New Hampshire area. It's WBOQ. It's 104.9 on the FM dial, but you have to be in the radius of where we are.
So it's a good fit for exactly what you have in mind, huh?
Yeah, and their market was people who like to listen to music from the 70s and the 80s. So, I mean, the market was great for us.
Demographics, a perfect fit.
Who we were.
Yeah.
And it worked. Yeah. And so, once again, it took about 4 to 6 months before we started getting prospective calls. But now, I mean, we are the go-to firm up there. I mean, the radio station, we are the financial experts at that radio station now.
Yeah.
They allow other firms to advertise, but from a radio show that we do on the weekends, we're the only ones that can do a financial radio show there.
And you're right there in the community where a lot of the other shows will syndicate to all kinds of places, but I don't know if they do it on your station or not, but I do see that as well.
No, and I'm not interested in that.
Yeah.
I don't even want to make the money. I don't care about that. I want to stay local. But the other way, Chris, that we market ourselves, and we've been doing this successfully since March of 2009, is we do a weekly newsletter. And I know many people who listen to this podcast already receive my newsletter because 30% of the 7,500 subscribers are actually financial advisors. My newsletter goes out every Friday at 10:30.
How many?
It's called 7,500 subscribers.
Wow.
Yeah. And so 30% of them are financial advisors. And they could be local, they could be national. I got financial advisors in Australia and the Netherlands and Germany that subscribe to this. And it's called Planning Pointers. It comes out every Friday at 10:30 in the morning. We've been doing it consistently since March of 2009. And it's a connection point to our clients and also to the community so that we can continue to live by our goal of having 72 points of contact with our clients every year.
So that's a big part of that effort.
Sure. 52 weeks of it takes care of the newsletter.
Yeah.
You get 12 more that is in the form of a monthly statement. That gets you up to 64.
Yeah.
You do 1 or 2 client review meetings. That gets you to 66. We send out a quarterly performance report. That gets you to 70. And then there's all sorts of communications, phone calls, emails, client events, all that stuff that we do.
Yeah.
That certainly gets you to at least 72.
What kind of client events do you do?
We do client appreciation and client social events primarily. We do a boat cruise every summer. Here's the funniest thing. We do this sunset cruise out of Salem Harbor every year. We've been doing it probably 8 or 9 years now. 150 to 200 people go on the boat. And we've had people that have called us that said, hey, I hear about the sunset cruise that you do for the summer. If I become a client, will I get an invitation to go on the cruise? They're not choosing us on whether we'd be a great financial planner for them.
But you got a good cruise,
if I become a client, am I getting an invite? And I shake my head because I go, look, I mean, now granted, we put on some good food and there's entertainment, but for $20, you can go to the same boat and take a Salem Harbor cruise.
Yeah. That's
always
funny.
blows me away.
I want to go back to the communication. With the communication, you said you do that every week at the same time. How much time does it require for the preparation of that? Do you do it only yourself, or do others participate in the preparation of that?
Yeah. So we use Planning Pointers. So we are writing our own newsletter every single Friday. We're not buying some canned software system. What we're doing is doing a lot of reading over the course of every day, every week. And when I come across a story, when Marion comes across a story, any of us in the office, we say, hey, this might be of interest to our clients. Mm-hmm. So we keep sending those to Jody, and she has this huge list of stories. And so Jody then picks 3 stories that she thinks will be relevant for the newsletter. And then she actually starts, she writes about 100-word paragraph that describes the story. So that's what you see on the newsletter. And then there's a link to the story that assists it. Sometimes we write our own blogs and we write our own stuff, but mostly it's linking to other stories that are already out there with a nice little hook in our piece. So Jody writes it and does it in a couple hours and it's done. That's
great. That's great.
Yeah.
You also mentioned the coronavirus earlier, and I'd like to talk about that. I know you're proud of your location, so maybe I should start with that. You're not getting to have people into your location, but tell about your office setup and the way you interact with clients. And do you do things at a conference table, or do you do things differently?
Yeah. So, right now I do it from a Zoom
meeting
camera here in my house is how we do things. But so our office is located right across the street from the North Shore Mall in Peabody. Mm-hmm. Right across, so everybody knows where the North Shore Mall is. Right. One of the side streets that's a pretty main street is a brand new building. It's a brand new white building. On the first floor is a restaurant called Alto Forno, which is a really nice high-end Italian restaurant that is only open for dinner. They have the first floor. I have the second floor. Our name is on the building.
Nice.
What's really nice is that
great visibility.
Because we do regular weekday hours, 8:30 to 5, there's never a problem for parking. People can pull right up to my door and they can walk in.
Right.
The restaurant's not busy because they don't open for dinner. So the restaurant loves having us as tenants. It's a great, great deal for them.
Nice.
When our clients walk in, it's a really nice setting. We moved to this new space about 3 years ago, and I give Jody and Marion and a lot of other people credit for really helping us design something that is really attractive and comfortable for our clients. They're met by Jody. She offers them coffee, some water, snack, something that they might like. And then we escort them into the conference room, and that's where I meet with clients. We've got a really big screen on the wall that we have wireless capabilities to use a laptop so that it shows up on the screen. It's very comfortable, lots of windows. Everybody makes make great comments when they walk into the office. They just feel a real sense of warmth, and it's professional, but it's warm. And that's where all the action happens. No one comes into my office or Marion's. In fact, Marion and I chose to take very small offices because it's just us in our own individual offices.
Right.
We'd rather dedicate it to large space in the conference rooms.
Very good. So tell a little bit about how you all have been handling the response to the coronavirus. Everyone these days, I imagine, listening is also going through similar chaos, if you will, in terms of moving to virtual. I think it's relative in air quotes, but relatively easy in our industry to remain in business, unlike some industries right now. But what's your experience been? How difficult was this for you? Did you have experience with remote work with members of your team already? And just, I don't know, maybe you can touch on the whole coronavirus issue. And then communication with your clients, I also want to get to from in relation to what's been happening in the markets. So
when we moved into our new office 3 years ago, one of the things that we decided to put into place was a business continuity plan, which said, what if the building caught fire? What would we do? And we moved to digital phones, and everything would work fine in the office. But one day we said, all right, it's fire day today. And we all escaped from the office, grabbed our stuff, and went to my house. We actually just went for lunch. But we plugged in all of our stuff to see if we could work from various places within my house. I figured if we can do it in my house, we can do it remotely anywhere.
Right.
And it was relatively easy to set everything up. We could use our phone like it's as if we were intercomming with each other one place or another. Mm-hmm. It worked out great. We never had to test it again until, it was strongly suggested that we no longer work in our offices. And so we've been out of the office now for about 3 weeks, all working from our own homes. We have a Zoom conference call every day at 10 o'clock and 2 o'clock just to check in with one another. But since then, we've had a variety of communication pieces for our clients. We've always been really good about communicating. I give our team a lot of credit for that. It starts with our Friday newsletter, but periodically we'll write a letter or two just to reach out to our clients, just let them know that we're here. We know that they're challenged with the environment that we're in, and we generally email it, but we do have a list of clients that don't like to use emails, so we know who to mail to as well. In addition to that, I think our first call was March 17th and 18th. We did a virtual town hall, which was a video for our clients. Yeah. We did it on a Tuesday at 4 o'clock and then a Wednesday at 11 o'clock. There was 80 people who signed up for the first and 42 that signed up for the second. And what we did was we did a little bit of an overview, just letting people we offered up our thoughts because at the time there was no stimulus package at the time. We were just pretty uncertain with what was going on. Right. And we allowed our clients to write in advance with some questions, and Marion and I answered those questions online. We then the following week wrote a communication out to our clients in addition to our newsletter. The week thereafter, we held a conference call, and this was March, I think it was like March 24th or 25th when the market had really dropped. We were down some 30-something%. Right. We unfortunately learned that there's a maximum of 100 people allowed on the Zoom call until we expanded it, of course. So we sold that out. Oh, yeah. We had to block people out, so we felt bad about that. We got inundated with questions. Were you recording it? Were you able to record it and post it? We thought we could record it, but I was hesitant to record it. Yes. Simply because sharing that information, I don't mind sharing communications that I have with our clients when we're talking to advisory clients only, but the rules around sharing information like that to brokerage clients or prospects is something that there's some compliance concerns around that, and I totally understand that. Yeah. So we want to keep this exclusively for our advisory clients. And then last week we decided to expand it open again, and we have space for 300 people to join. We had 142 people on our call last week. I actually thought people would start cutting down and not going, but people still keep coming. And then we had another one yesterday. Fortunately, we only had 84 people on that call. So people are starting to unwind. They're not as threatened by what's going on. They're getting comfortable being comfortable.
Yeah, of course, the market's rebounded some in that time. That's probably helping as well.
It has. And, the questions that people are getting are becoming more regular. People are calling the office. The phone is not ringing off the hook. Everyone asks the question, so how many of your clients have sold out? You got 450 households. How many people have sold out or asked to go to cash?
Yeah.
And the answer, and I tell them straight out, I'm not hiding it from anybody. The answer is one. One person has decided to go to cash. But what's really interesting about that one person, they were 100% in bonds. They simply couldn't watch the fluctuation of anything. But our clients,
so they're already pretty cautious to begin with.
Right.
And yeah.
Well, for many bond investors, they were a little surprised when they saw the values of bonds fall rather dramatically.
Right.
And it was not something that he was expecting, frankly, not something that we had expected. But we also tried to remind him that generally we went through this in 08 and 09. When there's a little bit more liquidity in the credit markets, the prices of bonds will come back up.
Right.
He didn't believe that, wasn't willing to stick around for it. But as we can see, many of the bonds have responded pretty well.
Yeah.
There's still some room to go for sure.
Sure.
But
with some of the backstop that the Fed has provided, it's helped a lot with those concerns. Yeah.
Right.
Well,
the other community.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry. That sounds like a lot of interaction with your clientele and a lot of live engagement with these group settings.
It is. And we're finding that the group settings are calming for a large number of people because they're hearing when I talk about a question out loud through that Zoom call, people are saying, oh my God, that was going through my head as well. And so the big question that a lot of clients have had, because like I said, 65% of my clients are on payouts. They're saying, well, I'm taking a check every month from my account. Does this mean I have to cut back on my monthly check? And that's a question that a lot of people have on their mind. Am I in trouble?
Right.
And we learned back in 07 and 08 and 09 that one of the things that we weren't doing a good enough job with back then that we do a very good job with now is to make sure when we tell our clients that they need to have an emergency fund when we put together a financial plan for them, we're going back every year to make sure that they still have their emergency fund.
Yes.
And if they've depleted it, that we're going to help them replenish it. Because this is not the time to be using your investment account as an emergency fund. And so the portfolios...
And those do get used up when you're not looking, right?
Absolutely. So that's why, as a financial planner, we have an obligation to look at our clients' overall portfolio, not just their investment portfolio. We need to get them to revalidate the values of accounts in their bank and everywhere else that they have so that we can give them the best possible advice. And we do that.
So you mentioned a couple of things with your planning, and something I meant to ask earlier. Do you have some sort of a checklist that allows you to think of all the various things that you need to be, checking in on and reviewing and, what to ask about their property and casualty insurance or whatever it might be that's like not your everyday stuff that you might be focused on when it comes to issues of net worth and portfolio and so forth? Insurance.
Chris, it's a great question because we talk about it all the time and we've actually tried writing those up.
Yeah.
And when we grab them and we try to implement, we say, we've been doing this for so many years.
It's hard to come up with all the questions. There's so many of them.
Well, it's kind of natural to know what questions you need to ask at different times.
Yeah.
The challenge I have is if I was a firm that was looking to just expand and grow and train others, you need those checklists. You need to have those lists. Right. And there are places out there that have those. So a really good set of lists. In fact, I think the FPA, the national chapter, and perhaps locally, you might even have some of those resources available to help advisors try to think through what those questions should be and what topics they should be focusing on. But in our office, no, we don't have one right now.
Well, that brings us to a good place to kind of wind down our conversation, and that is maybe to ask you a little bit about how has the FPA been a part of your career track and your professional life. And I know you've been active, and I'll just have you talk a little bit about your experience with the Financial Planning Association.
Yeah, I will tell you this. I would not be as good of a financial planner as I am today or as my firm is today had it not been for the Financial Planning Association. There's no question about that. I was involved at the local chapter early on, and then had the great opportunity and honor of being part of the national board at the FPA back in 2001. I was actually flying on a plane, getting ready to fly to San Diego on September 11th, 2001.
Oh, my goodness.
Where the national conference was being held, and I was the chairman of that national conference. And there was about 4,500 people expected to attend. Our plane backed away from the jetway, and we never actually took off that day because we all know what happened.
Yeah.
And I was trying to figure out, how am I going to get to San Diego? How are we going to do this conference? How's this all going to happen? We all know that never happened.
Sure.
And life changed. But as I'm pacing up and down the front walk of my house, trying to figure out how am I reshift.
Do I start driving now? Right. Yeah.
And like, well, how am I going to get to San Diego from Boston? Right.
Yeah. Right.
I get a phone call from Ray Ferrara and from Scott Cahan, who were both on the national board at the time,
Yep.
saying that the national board was already in San Diego, preparing for the conference. And one of the things that they were doing that day was having nominations of new board of directors. And they had nominated me to join the national board at the FPA. So that day I found out that I was on the national board.
Nice.
And so, yeah, so it was one of the greatest parts of being in leadership at the FPA.
How long were you engaged with the national board level?
Well, I was on the national board for 3.5 years. I served my 3 years terms.
Yeah.
And then after I left, I was then appointed to the national chairman position for the FPA National Conference, which was in Boston in 2008.
I remember that, yeah.
So my history of being a chairman of national conferences is
maybe not a good thing. Huh?
Because actually, you can back up one. I actually have a threefer, because in 2006, the national conference was supposed to be in New Orleans.
Oh.
But Hurricane Katrina came in, and that never happened, and it got reshifted to Nashville, and that's where I was the national chairman there at that conference.
Oh my goodness!
So, but I will tell you, one of the things that's great about being in leadership, whether it's at the national level or even at your local level, is you have an opportunity not only to interact with people who come from all different walks of life that all share a similar passion to the financial planning profession, but what you're all doing when you're all together is you leave your egos at the door and you all come together to think about, how could this profession be better for everybody, not just for my own practice? And you have conversations that are far more strategic and far less tactical. And it allows me as a business owner now in my own firm to think that way as we try to make decisions about what's best for Friedman Financial, what's best for our firm, and are we still allowing ourselves to embrace the fiduciary model and the fiduciary mantra that we come out and talk about all the time. That's why I continue to press the idea, and I will do it till I'm blue in the face, that if you want to say, I am placing the interests of my clients first, you need to have a verified net worth and cash flow statement for all of your clients before you ever, ever, ever make recommendations about their investment portfolio.
Well, Mark, thanks so much for your contribution as a volunteer leader, but thank you for taking the time and sharing so much with our listeners about your practice and what's led to the success you've had. So thank you.
Thanks for having me, Chris. I really appreciate it.
In times of dramatic market movements like these, we're all reminded of the importance of having good business structures, a top quality team, and close personal contacts with our clients. Hi everybody, Chris Boyd here. My firm Asset Management Resources, AMR, is a registered investment advisor, and if you or your firm doesn't yet have a continuity plan for the just in case, consider us. Whether just as a backup for the unforeseen, or if you're starting to think about when it's time to transition out of your practice, give us a call to see if we might be a good fit. Call me at Asset Management Resources toll-free 866-771-8901. That's 866-771-8901. Or send me an email at chris@amrfinancial.com. assetmanagementfinancial.com. If you're looking for a firm that's big enough for scale, but small enough to care, consider Asset Management Resources, where clients come first. All right, welcome back to the program, everybody. Thanks for being with us. I've got a bunch of the members from our team at Asset Management Resources with me on the line. I've got Mike Perna at our Dedham office. Mike's here. Hey, Mike.
Hello, everybody.
I've got Brian Regan. He is our portfolio manager.
Hi, everybody.
And Scott Birmingham, a certified financial planner with us.
How we doing?
Doing all right. So thanks everybody calling in remotely, and as we do our work remotely these days, good to have a chance to chat with you all. And one of the things that I mentioned last week that was a big newsworthy event was the passage of the CARES Act. It was really responsible to a large extent for a lot of the buoyancy the market saw last week, and continues to see a little more, back and forth with volatility. But even so, it's part of what gives the markets, I think, some comfort to know this, how this is going to play out. So I thought it was important for us to talk a little bit about what's in the CARES Act and how it might affect our listeners, and just what's in it for who. It seems like there's a little bit in there for a lot of people. So, Scott, why don't we start with talking about how consumers, are the individuals, may be impacted by this, with a few of the tidbits that might be relevant.
So the government has enacted a feature to help folks out, allowing you to tap your 401k or your IRA. Obviously not the first place we'd have clients go, but if that's where your money is, they're letting you tap up to $100,000 your 401k or IRA. And what they're doing is they are waiving the typical 10% penalty if you're under age 59 and a half.
Now, Scott, feature. Is there an income tax if I take that $100,000 out?
There is income tax. They're allowing you to either claim it this year, or they're allowing you to spread it over 3 years. And I guess depending on how impacted you are by this event, it might make sense to have it all on your tax return this year.
If you're unemployed, and that's why you might need to make the withdrawal as an example. Yeah, I got you.
Correct. Another feature is they are not requiring you to do the typical mandatory withholding, as usually the case. So that's a nice kind of feature they're passing on the funds.
Now, if I take that money out, is it a loan or is it a withdrawal?
I don't know if it's technically considered a loan because there's actually loan features in 401ks, but it is expected to be repaid, and you can do it over 3 years, lump sum or in installments, essentially to avoid that being seen as a distribution. So you're essentially putting it back into your account. So if you get it back in the time frame, you have to do an amended tax return.
I understand there are other features for individuals that are important to recognize, particularly also for retirees.
Sure, for typically taking required minimum distributions, which is a government rule. It used to be 7.5, it's 72 now. But so if you have a retirement account and you have to take your annual required minimum distributions, they are actually waiving it for 2020. So, with the market taking a big tumble, they're kind of cutting you a break, where you're not taking money out essentially when the market is down. And also, if you've already taken this year's or already taken a few payments, you can actually put those back in. So that's actually a kind of perk as well.
Very good. Well, I imagine too, I know there's other aspects that are relevant to listeners of all ages, but some different income levels get excluded. People are going to get some money directly through the recent legislation, correct?
Yes, they are. Depending on your income level, if it goes married, joint, $150,000, head of household, $112,500, then everybody else is kind of $75,000. So it's kind of based on that.
So the figures were if you're a married couple filing jointly,
150.
up to $150,000 of income, you might expect $3,400 for your couple. If you're a single person, that's $1,200, but it caps at an income of $75,000. If you have children, you could get perhaps an additional $500 per child as a supplemental payment. So, and these also, will they, I mean, I don't know if you know from this legislation, but is that considered taxable income when people receive that? And then they'll, have to pay tax on that? Mike, do you know that one?
Chris, the payments, the $1,200 payments and the supplemental $500 for children are not taxable federal. And generally, that would have to be assumed that they wouldn't be state taxable because the state of Massachusetts follows the federal. So in neither case would they be taxable.
Thank you. What other features are there that are relevant to our listeners in terms of things like unemployment and so forth? Brian, do you want to comment on that?
Well, we do know that unemployment claims were extended a month. So usually it used to be 3 months. Now it's 4 months. Which is great, especially, if you're already on the unemployment line, you get extended a month. But if you just get laid off or furloughed, you're going to get extra time. But even on top of that, typically, on average, you get about half your paychecks, depending on what state you're in, if you're collecting unemployment. Now the federal government is going to tack on a $600 absolute amount on top of that paycheck. So
per week,
if your unemployment benefits are around $400, which is the average, and you get another $600, you'll be getting $1,000 per unemployment check.
It's also expected that 1099 employees or gig workers, freelancers, might have the opportunity to apply for unemployment benefits, which is a rarity and unusual. We saw, Mike, you can speak to this. Tax returns put off a little bit, not under the gun, huh? For April 15th deadline. Yeah.
Yeah, they've been put off for 3 months. And, of course, that'll be a big help, for virtually everybody. So that's a really good way to, lend a hand to the general public. They've got enough to worry about without having to worry about getting their taxes in by April 15th.
Very good. There were some things about coverage benefits for people who might be getting testing or treatments or vaccines for the coronavirus as those things become available as well as part of the legislation. There are grants as well for small businesses. Brian, you want to talk a little bit about first the small business picture and then maybe how some of the big businesses are affected by this?
Sure. So the big thing for small businesses is they have a $350 billion allocated for forgivable loans. So basically, if you're a small business and you apply to the Small Business Administration, you can get a loan up to $10 million to maintain payroll and your overhead during obviously a tough time. So we encourage everybody who's shut down, if you're a restaurant, if you're a barber, whatever you are, please, look into that to keep your business afloat. And then these are forgivable loans. On top of that, there's going to be there's additional money, a much smaller amount for just grants for emergency funds. These typically businesses that have already been working with the SBA. So moving on to big businesses, from small businesses, they've made a big effort to look out for industries that they consider important for national defense. There's a $17 billion fund there. And airlines. Now, the money that is going to go to these loans is not without restrictions. There's going to be reporting requirements. So every loan that's taken from every business is going to be open to the public. Anything that goes out is going to be available to be seen. Mm-hmm. There's an oversight committee. There's no benefit for the president or his businesses. And more importantly, there's a stock buyback ban until the loan, for the term of the loan plus 1 year. So even 1 year longer than the loan. So if you need a 2-year loan to stay afloat, then you can't buy back stock for 3 years.
Very good.
For all other businesses, there's a smaller amount to encourage people to keep folks paid on payroll.
Very good. Mike, do you want to talk about some of the public health benefits that were in the legislation?
Yes. To begin with, the government will be sending $100 billion for hospitals who have responded to the coronavirus. There's another $1.32 billion in immediate funding for community centers to provide care services roughly for 28 million people. Drug access is another area. There's $11 billion for diagnostics, treatments, and vaccines. The bill also includes $80 million for the Food and Drug Administration to prioritize and expedite approval of new drugs. And the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention are getting $4.3 billion. Veteran health centers, another $20 billion. Telehealth, the bill authorizes a critical telehealth program to extend the reach of virtual and doctor's appointments. In medicines and supplies, the bill gives $16 billion to the Strategic National Stockpile to increase availability of equipment, including ventilators and masks. It also boosts hiring for vital healthcare jobs during the public health crisis and speeds the development of the vaccine, treatments, and faster diagnostics.
Okay, well, there are other features about the recent legislation, the CARES legislation, things that would be helpful for food stamps and food banks and all kinds of things of that sort. Scott, we kind of jumped over this. I think we should have mentioned student loans. What's the benefit for students who may want to be aware of this?
Sure. If you have a federal student loan, not a private, federal, they are suspending interest on those loans, any payment requirements until September 30th. But the way I read it, it does look like you have to make the effort to actually go in and stop your payments and take care of it yourself. So
if you're an automated payment, it'll still happen.
Right.
But yeah. Well, and we should source this. There's a lot of great information we obtained from an online article that was provided. Brian, you found this through a website that was produced by NPR.
Kitsis.com provided some information as well.
Great. So there's a lot of places to find useful information. If you want to get into the details, I think the key for the clients of our listeners would be two things. One is, if you're unemployed, there's benefits that are available. They are greater than your ordinary benefits would be. They're extended longer and maybe open to people who might not ordinarily be available to them. For businesses, there's these loans that can be grants that could be useful in trying to keep your business going in the midst of challenging times where you may not get the opportunity to regain some of that business after the fact, particularly if not all business, but some business will have that challenge. Well, gentlemen, thank you for your participation. I guess that brings us to the end of our program. If you'd like to learn more about the Financial Planning Association of Massachusetts, check out our website, fpama.org. You can learn more about our calendar of events and all that's going on in the chapter. We hope you'll join. Again, that's fpama.org. Well, until next time, have a wicked good day.